read How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie as often as you can. You get done reading it, read it again, and then read it again, and read it again. Because the hardest thing for people to do when they transition out of that public sector and into the private sector is how to just engage with people, right? Listen, I may not be the most qualified. You may not be the most qualified guy for the job, but you're the right guy. You know what I mean? It's how you interface with people, how you communicate, how you present yourself, right? How you are as a leader, a compassionate, kind, loving person as a leader. The rest of the stuff you can learn. Now you got to get your feet wet a little bit before you pull chocks and get out of there. You got to start building your network, right? That's a huge deal. Networking and building relationships and fostering and nurturing those relationships. You're going to have to do things for free, right? I would say that if you're transitioning out of the police department and you have a certain skill set, while you're in the police department, be an auditor, be an investigator, be the community outreach and the community engagement person. I was the equivalent of a grunt in the Marine Corps when I was on the job. All I did was chase people with guns. That's all I did in South Central Los Angeles and in South Los Angeles. That's all I did. Guns, chase people, climb fences, shootings. That's all I wanted to do. But how does that help me when I get out? It doesn't.
Welcome to the Transition Drill Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Pantiani. I appreciate you taking the time to watch. So let's get into this. What I first want to talk to you about is riding a bicycle from LA to basically Central California, correct?
Yeah, Newman, California, yeah.
How'd that come about?
Man, that's pretty cool.
Well, here's the thing. I remember just kind of peripherally seeing the story that an LAPD officer had ridden his bike to, Central California. I couldn't remember the agency, but I remember it was to honor a fallen officer.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I did triathlons for a bunch of years. If you Google my last name, there's cycling in my family history. So cycling's always kind of been one of those things.
Yeah.
Right after 9/11, that group that rode from California to
was it New York?
Yeah. There was a part of me that's like, God, I would really want to do that. So anytime I see a story that is law enforcement related, especially in memorial of something, and then cycling, it always kind of draws me to it.
Yeah.
And so I remembered that story when you and I connected, and I was like, that name sounds familiar.
Yeah.
And so I went back and I looked up the article, and it was you.
Yeah. Well, a good friend of mine, he's an LAPD guy, and he runs a nonprofit, Blue Coat Foundation. And so at the time I was already starting to deal with a little bit of the mental health stuff, right? I was kind of confused as to what was going on, but when I had learned that Ronell Singh had been murdered, and it was that close to Christmas, right? And it hit me super hard. Like it buckled me, man. And I never knew him. He's a cop, and so it hit me. So I reached out to Chris. I said, hey, man, we got to do something for his family. We got to raise some money. We got to do something, man. We got to bring eyes to the story. So at the time I knew that he had started something called Project Endure. And it was when two LAPD officers, they ran from LA to Sacramento.
I remember that also.
Yeah, two LAPD cops in full uniform. Man.
I was going to say,
yeah.
In my mind, I was just thinking now, not SWAT gear, like regular police uniform.
Yeah. And I'm like, man, I got to do something like that, but it's got to be crazy. So I said, I want to ride my bike from LA County all the way up to Newman, California, right to Newman Police Department. And I'm like, but I want to do it in one single speed, one gear, right? I want to ride through the Grapevine, and at a minimum, I want to do 100 miles a day. Blistering heat. We got to do something that I mean, the average person can't do every day. And so we did it, man. I got on my single speed bike. I rode from LA County all the way up to Newman, California in about, total 3 days maybe. And selfishly, I think it was more about me at the time, right? I just wanted to feel like I was a part of something, because at that time in my career, I was really starting to spiral pretty bad. I was losing my identity. I didn't know what the hell was going on, to be honest with you. But I knew that I wanted to be a part of something else, something that was bigger than me. And so that's why we did it. And it was a beautiful thing, man. I got to meet the chief of police over there up at Newman, and I got to meet Ronell's family. It was good, man. It was good. It was good for me, and it was good for everybody involved. And, hopefully here in the near future, we can do something else like that again. But yeah, that's how that started.
Were you a cyclist before that?
On and off. I was mostly mountain biking. I did some road riding, but nothing with any regularity. But I always try to, exercise, do some more of a runner than anything like that.
But still, even to take on that task on a single speed.
Yeah.
I mean, that
was brutal, man.
Again, like you pointed out, not to completely overshadow what the end goal was to honor that fallen officer, but the sacrifice, the physical sacrifice that you put yourself through.
Yeah.
For somebody who doesn't ride, the idea of riding that far on a single speed.
Yeah.
That's commendable.
Yeah, thank you, man. I appreciate that. And again, it was at the time, like I said earlier, it was more about me and trying to maybe fix something that I didn't know, I didn't really understand what was going on in my mind, but I knew I had to do something that would take me away from me. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, makes perfect sense. Let's back up a little bit. Where were you born?
In the Bronx, New York City. Yeah.
And did you end up growing up in the city?
Yeah, I grew up in New York City, in the Bronx. I spent, I was there until I was 17. That was in the 80s and 90s, right around, the crack epidemic, heroin. It was crazy, man. It was crazy. Yeah, I mean, that's the only way I can describe it. I mean, growing up in New York City in the late 80s, early 90s, it was, throughout the 80s, man, it was crazy, man. Drugs, shootings, it was bananas. It was nuts.
Big family, small family?
Yeah, got a brother. He's who I love to death. Unfortunately, he suffers from mental illness, bipolar schizophrenia. He's in a mental facility. I love him to death. My sister, she's a teacher, New York, 4 kids, married to lieutenant commander for NYPD, a very successful young lady, double masters. She's awesome. Yeah, teacher.
What kind of work did your parents do?
My dad was a Vietnam veteran. As soon as he got back from Vietnam, he gave it a go to start his own business. I remember he used to repair TVs in the basement of the house that we lived in, and then he's a mailman, letter carrier, man, for a long time. He retired out of the postal service after 27, 28 years.
A long lineage of family in New York, or?
Yeah, most of my family. All my family, really, New York, New Jersey, that part of town.
Growing up as a kid, what kind of it took up your daily life?
You know what? Honestly, man, I don't have any I do have vivid memories, but I didn't like growing up in New York. Like I said, my brother has suffered from mental illness. The onset was right about 17 or 18. I did normal stuff, man. I basketball, baseball, sponge ball, wiffle ball, football in the streets, from sewer to sewer, running along rooftops of these buildings in New York City, riding the subways, piecing together BMX bikes from scrap parts and things like that. I do remember, though, the transition from, I was about maybe 13, 14 years old, and that's when drugs, because my neighborhood was pretty chill, but when drugs came in, when crack and heroin came in, man, it was a nightmare. So, to answer your question, I did the things that most kids would do at that age, about 12, 13. But, from 13 to about 17, man, I was just trying not to get killed out there, to be honest with you. The shootings were crazy, murders, heroin addicts burning stolen cars on my street, man. It was nuts. So I think when that happened, that kind of I was frozen, right? Like I wasn't evolving. I wasn't doing the things that normal kids were doing. I was just trying not to get killed out there, you know.
For people who have been to New York recently, they really don't know the idea. And I won't even use the Bronx. I'll just use Times Square. And the way, you know, Broadway is completely shut down now. It's a pedestrian mall.
Yeah.
But and I say that only because I have a connection. I was born in Queens.
Oh, right on.
My dad grew up in Brooklyn, you know, but
nice, man.
My mom was from California. So when I was young, she wanted to come back here. So I didn't get to grow up there, but I've been back many times. And there is something that, you know, I love about the city.
Yeah.
But I have experienced it peripherally in that change.
Yeah.
And so for you to grow up when we see the old music videos, the old TV shows, the old movies of what the Bronx was like in its worst, and you were in the middle of it.
Yeah, man, it was crazy. It was like, you know, when you look at all those buildings in World War II that were bombed, and it was just like rubble, brick, and, you know, I remember that, man. I remember that, you know, the Bronx looked like that. It's a shame, man, because, you know, I remember some of the good times, and now that, you know, if I watch a movie or I go visit, I just feel like, man, this was a really cool place, but there's so much trauma connected to that I don't really enjoy going back. Really, if I do go back, you know, I hang out with my mom and dad, see my sister, my nieces, and my nephew, but I'm not out there, man. You know, I don't enjoy it.
Other than trying to keep your head down and not get shot, did you have any plans for yourself for adulthood?
I had no idea. When my brother got sick, it brought my family to its knees, and so I kind of and I've never shared this with my parents, but I kind of resented the fact that happened to him, right? Because I was like, man, what about me? You know, I had lost my way. I was always a pretty good student. My dad's super smart. Mom is super hard working, super smart. But I just wanted to get the hell out of there, man. I didn't have any plans. I didn't know what the hell I was going to do. They got to a point where I was in school, but I wasn't in school, if you know what I mean. I really didn't care.
You were just taking up a chair.
Yeah, man. I was just lost. And honestly, it's at that age is when I started really thinking about, you know, like, why am I here? You know, what's the point? And even at 17, I'm like, I don't know what the hell I'm gonna do. And my dad was like, you gotta bounce, man. You gotta get out of here. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, you're not gonna go to college. We can't afford college. You know, your grades are horrible. You got to figure something out, man, because you ain't sticking around here. And he said, let's take a walk to the recruiting office on the Grand Concourse in the Bronx and Fordham Road. And, you know, he introduced me to the Marine Corps recruiter, and that was it.
Was your dad in the Marine Corps in Vietnam?
Navy. He was in the Navy. Yeah.
But was he pushing the Marine Corps, or did you on your own? Because I'm sure you probably walked into one of those typical recruiting offices where all the branches were in one office.
Yeah. That's exactly what it was, man. He pushed the Marine Corps. I don't know why. He was like, you got to get your head out of your ass, you know, basically. Excuse me, but you're going to the Marine Corps, man, and you're going to get a technical MOS, right? You're not gonna be a grunt, you know. He said you're gonna be a mechanic or something, and so I said, okay, whatever. As long as I get out of here, I'm cool. And took the ASVAB, went to MEPS. I was a helicopter mechanic for a long time there, and that was the first time where I felt like my life had purpose, man. It was awesome. The Marine Corps is just phenomenal, man. It was great.
Just real quick, for your dad, obviously your dad was looking at your long-term goals, but was there a little bit of, were you starting to head down maybe a wrong path?
Yeah. I was drinking at 13, 14. I was getting hammered drunk. I was drinking Old English, 40 ounces mixed with pina colada mix. And, you know, some of the guys I knew were smoking crack already. There was popping pills and smoking weed and you know, sniffing heroin, powdered heroin. You know, some of those kids that I grew up with. Some of those kids got killed. Some of those kids were, you know.
So your dad was looking not only for your long-term future, but fixing the present and just kind of, you need to get out of this environment.
Yeah, I think he had hit a wall too, right? Because he's looking at his son, and he's like, man, this dude's going to get killed out here. And he's obviously just given up on any effort into his education. So, and I don't know if part of my dad felt like, shit, like this is my son. We're living in the hood, man, and I've exposed my son to this environment, but I got to work. I remember my dad, no bullshit, man. He would get a voucher to get shoes, right? Because he's a mailman. He's walking all the time. And swear to you, man, I remember watching him in the living room put his socks on, and then he would wrap his feet in plastic bags and then put his shoes on. And I'm like, what the hell? And he would do that shit because he would give my brother and I his voucher for shoes, but his shoes were in such bad shape that walking in the snow and the rain, he would have to wrap them in plastic so his feet wouldn't get wet. And I think at some point he must have been trying to reconcile with, I got one son who's in a mental facility. I got another son who's probably not going to make it past 18 or 19. I got to get him the hell out of here. And I think that was a last resort for him. You know?
Well, and you mentioned before we started recording, we're both parents.
Yeah.
And life is completely different when you look at the world as a parent and what you need to give to your children. And to think that, your dad was doing that. Your dad he took whatever available resources he had and gave it back to his family.
Yeah. And you know what, Paul, I mean, that's what you're supposed to do, and he's a great guy, hardworking guy. Definitely think there's some mental health issues there for him as well, in the form of maybe some depression. He's in Vietnam for a long time, man, but yeah, I mean, I'm really proud of my dad for doing that, because he could have done the other thing and be like, I'm not going to deal with this shit. I'm out of here. Like the vast majority of my friends at the time, their dads were gone, and he's just a good, loving man, good, hardworking man.
So you went into the Marine Corps what year?
1992. I was 17. The day I graduated from high school, I was already on a bus going to MEPS. My dad was like, you're gone.
What were you thinking for yourself at that point in time? Was it a single enlistment and then go find something else to do, or were you kind of teetering on maybe even making it a career?
Yeah, at the time, I think that was the first Desert Storm right around that time. And the first Desert Storm had been wrapping up. And honestly, I was like, I'll go, man. Like, I don't care. Like, I want to go there.
It has to be better than where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I'm like, man, send me there. And so I didn't really know, man. Like, honestly, the recruiter didn't talk to me that much. I thought once you join the Marine Corps, you're in it forever. I didn't know anything. They didn't talk to me about enlistments. They didn't talk to me about EASs. They didn't talk to me about anything. I didn't benefits, nothing. They just said, man, you're going to go, and you're going to go to Parris Island, South Carolina. You're going to go to boot camp. I didn't know what was going to happen after that. I didn't care. I'm like, as long as I'm out of here, man, I'm good, And that's
one of the things I would say, good or bad, depending on your perspective. First responder community, they do the same thing. Seems like the military, for the most part. I would imagine it's probably getting better today because kids are coming in the door more informed. But in your situation, all the recruiter's looking at is you want to get out of here.
Yeah.
All I got to promise you is there. Yeah. I don't have to promise you the future. I just need to get you out of here.
Yeah.
And they don't do that for us. They don't, when you're signing on the dotted line, they don't talk to you about the future. It's just today.
Yeah. The thing is that, for my dad did tell me, this is a social safety net for a lot of kids in the inner city, the military. Because you're going to get medical benefits, you're going to get dental, you're going to get a paycheck, you can get 3 hots and a cot. This is really an opportunity for you a launch pad for your life. And I think he knew that. He's like, this is going to be good, man. This is going to give my son an opportunity at life. And I wish that the U.S. military would be more present in the inner city. More present in schools in the inner city, right? Because I had zero hope even at 17, I was already thinking about like suicide. But it gave me a chance at life. It gave me a chance at life. And say what you want about the U.S. military. You know, I have, you know, some family members who don't think highly of our country and our government and the U.S. military, but they provide so much for inner city youth, man, in the form of hope, right? And structure and mentorship and leadership and an opportunity to get your education paid for and to develop interpersonal skills and social skills. You know, you're not going to get that anywhere else.
Well, and you hit the nail on the head. For a lot of people, the military provides an opportunity.
Yeah.
An opportunity that you probably would have never had if you'd stayed in the environment you're in. And and for the most part, it is the lower income portion of our societies.
Yeah, 100%, man. And I can speak to that because I came from there. Some people don't like to hear it, but it's the absolute truth. It affords you an opportunity to do something that you probably would have never had access to. There's a trade-off, right?
Yes.
You're rolling the dice because you could not come back. And I have friends that didn't come back, but it's done amazing things for me, man.
So you did how many years total?
Just under 8.
Two enlistments?
Yeah, 2 enlistments, yeah.
In that second, well, you came to the end of your first enlistment.
Yeah.
Was it an easy decision to stay for the second?
Oh, 100%. I loved it, man. I loved having structure in my life. Someone taught me how to iron my own clothes, right? Someone taught me how to set an alarm clock, right? My dad wasn't waking me up. I loved everything about it, man. I loved working. I was working on helicopters, on Hueys and Cobras, right? 17-year-old kid. I had never been to college, but the Marine Corps put me through, aviation school in Memphis, Tennessee. And I was a part of something, man. And I had an amazing group of people from every walk of life, every demographic, right? Growing up in New York, in the Bronx at that time, it was black or Hispanic, right? Or Italian, but we never hung out with the Italian guys. And
didn't get over to Arthur Avenue very much.
Yeah. How do you know about this, man?
Dude, just because I didn't grow up in New York doesn't mean I don't love New York.
Yeah, man. So, no, man, I grew up in a 2-block radius, man. I wouldn't go past a certain, area on my block. I wouldn't go, to this avenue or this street, man. And God help you if you're out after 8 o'clock at night, man. You know what I mean? It's not happening. So, when I joined the Marine Corps, man, it was cool. I was hanging out because I'm just going to keep it real with you, man. Growing up, I didn't have black friends, man, because black and Hispanic thing was it was a real thing back then. Why? It's so stupid, right? Like, you look back at it now, you're like, Jesus Christ, man, you're an idiot, skin color matters,
You're hitting on something really important and we're obviously going to talk about your law enforcement career. But when you think about that and all the times that you've dealt with gangsters,
yeah,
and their rivalries with the guy across the street or whatever, because he's black or Hispanic or whatever, it's like if you could just yank those guys out and throw them in the military or throw them in a completely different environment, you realize your skin color means nothing.
It didn't. In the Marine Corps, it didn't matter, man. It honestly didn't matter. Now, some of that stuff would carry over, right? Because you had some kids that were knuckleheads before they join the Marine Corps, and they're going to be knuckleheads in the Marine Corps, and they're going to be knuckleheads when they get out of the Marine Corps, But honestly, man, I was hanging out with guys from Paducah, Kentucky, man, white kids, and black kids from Savannah, Georgia, man, and it was the coolest thing in the world to be able to live amongst people from different walks of life and different backgrounds and different skin colors that talked a different way and dressed a different way. It was awesome, man. It was the best thing that could have happened to me.
So at the end of your second enlistment, what made you get out?
That's when I think right around Kosovo, Bosnia was starting to kick up. But Bosnia. And I already had done 2 pumps. And I had a daughter at the time already. And I'm like, man, I hate leaving my daughter behind. I love the Marine Corps. I had put in for a B billet. Drill instructor duty. That's what I wanted to do. I love the creases in the uniform, and I loved everything about a Marine Corps drill instructor, man. It was awesome. And I knew that's what I wanted.
They do a horrible job of creating an image. The Marine Corps needs to work on creating that image.
These guys are sloppy, huh? They're terrible, man. Who does their like PR stuff, man? They're terrible. But
there's got to be business schools that evaluate the Marine Corps on selling their image.
Dude, you know, Simon Sinek talks a lot about, you know, his visit with the Marines, man. He talks very highly of the Marine Corps and their leadership capacity. And listen, they've been doing this shit for,
You're good.
Excuse me, but they've been doing this for a long time, man. You know, over 200 years. You're going to get it right. You're going to fail a lot. But through those failures, you know, the what's on the other end of it is something beautiful, man. And nobody does it like the Marine Corps.
Well, I think the best, let's say, how do I want to put this? When you talk to, or when you listen to somebody who's been in a different branch of the military and the way they talk positively or, you know, about the Marine Corps, there's something about their reputation, their history, and the way they ingrain that. It's like the day you walk in the door, here's your bag of history, and guess what? You're carrying this with you for the rest of your life.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, man. And I'm glad you brought that up, because in boot camp, the receiving drill instructors, one of the first things they talked about was that your skin color doesn't matter. Right. So immediately they're drilling into your head that you're part of this brotherhood and sisterhood, that where what you look like doesn't mean a thing. It was really nice, because for the first time in my life, it didn't matter that I was a Puerto Rican kid with really messed up English. Right. It didn't matter that the guy next to me was black, that the guy next to me was white. It didn't matter. For the first time in my life, it didn't matter. And immediately I felt this connection with the Marine Corps, like, wow, if this is what it's like, man, this is where I want to be, because nothing matters but your performance and how you treat people. And they just drilled it into your brain. Kindness, compassion, dignity, respect, loyalty, enthusiasm, you know, exercise good judgment. You know, everything about life that's right is what they were teaching you. You're human, we're fallible, we're going to fall off course. We're going to start drinking, right? We're going to start, you know, doing stupid things.
Marines drink?
No. It's a rumor, man. It's a rumor.
Somebody even said that they started in a bar.
Yeah, they did. Ton Tavern, man. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. But yeah, I loved it. Paul. It was great, man.
So coming out, where were you, when you discharged out, where were you at?
I was at Camp Pendleton. No. I went from Camp Pendleton to El Toro. I worked search and rescue at El Toro for a little bit, and then that base got decommissioned, and then I went down to Miramar.
So you were already on the West Coast?
Yeah. I was back and forth from you know, I was on 31st MU, then I was in Okinawa, but I was back and forth from the Far East to California.
So bottom line is you got a taste of California life and didn't want to leave.
You know what? It wasn't so much so that. It was that everything that I knew about life that was good was on Camp Pendleton, right? Everything that I knew about life that was pure and right with the world was on Camp Pendleton, man. My brothers and sisters were on there. So I had this really deep connection with the Marine base, and I knew that I didn't want to be far from it. Even when I got out, man, and I was a cop already, I would go back there. Swear to God, dude, I would drive back down to Oceanside and try to, you know, weasel my way on base just so I can be in that energy. I would, just the smells of, like, you know, jet fuel, man, or like your camis, or, you know, that stinky smell on, you know, your supplies and stuff, man. I was so connected to it that when I left it, I'm like, what am I doing, man? I just walked away from something that was everything that I wanted to be.
Now, you mentioned that part of your reasoning for getting out after your second enlistment, you now had a child.
Yeah.
Did you have a period where you legitimately regretted getting out of it?
Even still to this day. Yeah. Even still to this day, man, I miss it so much, because it was the first time where I felt like I belonged somewhere. and that I was around people that really loved me and that cared about me. You know, there's something to be said about a guy that carries you back to the barracks, you know, on his shoulders because you're so drunk you can't walk, right? And your brother's picking you up, and you know, and I say that, you know, there's a little bit of humor there, but I love those guys, man, and I think about those guys now, and I still love those guys, and I miss it so much. And anytime I see a helicopter flying, military helicopter, I'm like, damn, man, I miss it. Or I see a Marine Corps billboard, I'm like, man, that's where I belong, man. You know.
Do you consider going into the reserves just to kind of keep that connection?
You know what, I started looking into the Army National Guard about 7 years ago, and they're like, you're an old man. Like, we don't want you, man. You're sick, lame, and lazy. So I tried to give it another go, but I think I was too old at the time. So
coming out, so you were 8 years in, so we're now talking early 2000s?
Yeah, late 99. So I was just under 8 years because I had so much time. I EAS'd right around, I would say, July, August, September, like October maybe of 1999.
What were you planning for yourself with that transition out?
I knew that it had to be something where I was wearing a uniform. I knew that, and I knew it had to be something in service of other people. I needed that because that's where I found my value. Right. Outside of a paramilitary organization, I was going to be in bad shape. Right.
Taking a step backwards, though, and I didn't ask this previously, but growing up in the Bronx and the time that you did, as bad as the times were,
yeah,
did you have a good impression of cops?
No, I hated cops. But the thing is, a lot of my family members were cops. I remember a cop using his baton and hitting me in the stomach so hard, man. And I remember cops, slapping my brother around. It wasn't cool. It was, but again, I mean, I'm in that environment, right? I'm doing stuff that I shouldn't be doing. I'm acting like a little knucklehead, man. I'm just being a bad kid. At the time, the streets had taken over, and no, there was a hate relationship with cops, man. We saw them as an occupying force. They just came in, and all of them were white guys, at the time, like Irish guys, you know what I mean? And so, no, I hated cops, but I wanted to be one because I wanted to be a good one, and so, yeah, I guess to answer your question, I knew that I wanted to be in service, and being a police officer was something that I could just get right into.
So it wasn't something you struggled with making that decision. It was I don't want to say easy, but you could make that transition and still remain in uniform and not carry that old baggage with you, so to speak. Yeah.
And when I went to go take the test at Dodger Stadium, I remember taking the test over there. I was in line, a bunch of Marines in line, bunch of Marines at the time. And I'm like, oh, this is cool, man. Those guys are sharp, man. Pressed and ties and all that. Dumb, eating crayons in line, but they were sharp.
Yeah, you didn't pick an agency that prides itself on its presentation and its image.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. The Marine Corps, LAPD, or both?
Well, I'm talking about going from the Marine Corps. When I say you tested with LAPD, I was referring to, because I'll tell anybody, LAPD uniform, they take it seriously.
Oh, yeah, man. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And what's interesting is I know that a big piece of the Marine Corps' transition, the LAPD's transition into that uniform was, and I'm going to have to fact check here, but there was rumors and talks about the Marine Corps having a huge influence on the LAPD uniform and a huge influence on the LAPD organizational structure, right? Because LAPD was in dire straits, I think, right before Chief Parker, and you had a jarhead come in and kind of turn things around, and so the LAPD history and the Marine Corps history are intertwined right around Chief Parker, before Chief Parker time, so it's evident too.
Was LAPD the only agency you looked at?
I looked at NYPD, but I knew I didn't want to go back to New York, right? And it's going to it's going to come out wrong, but I I looked at the uniform, man. I'm like, I'm wearing that uniform, man. I'm wearing that uniform. You know, whatever I got to do, man, I'm putting that uniform on.
And I don't have to work in the snow.
Yeah, and I don't have to work in the snow, man, and deal with mile high projects and things like that. But yeah, I don't want to go back to New York, man.
But out here on the West Coast, it was LAPD was the only one you looked at?
That's it, man.
Put all your eggs in one basket.
That's it. And
so what year did you come on board with LAPD?
Late 99, 2000. Right. So I had to push my academy day because I was still on terminal leave from the Marine Corps. And I was like, oh, man, I don't want to get caught up in doing something wrong. You know, I'm just going to ride this out. Let me EAS officially, and then I'll get into the academy.
Coming on board from the Marine Corps to LAPD, was there any struggle with that transition, or was it a fairly easy transition to go into public sector or public safety? It was tough.
It was tough because I didn't know how to speak the civilian language. You know, and this coming from the Marine Corps, man, and I was still pretty young. I was expecting the LAPD to be that regimented, and I was expecting everybody in my academy class to be that focused linearly, right? Like, this is the mission, this is what we do, boom, that's it. But when I joined the academy, I was like, oh man, this isn't really what I thought it was going to be. Still military type structure, but you got some people here, man, that shouldn't be here, you know, and they phased them out throughout the academy. But it wasn't easy, man. It was an adjustment period there. Now I know that's normal now, right? But in the moment, I'm like, oh, it's kind of weird. But it was, all in all, it was okay. But it was tough. Yeah, it was tough.
And you ended up doing it because you recently retired. So you ended up doing how many years?
Over 21 years.
And was that your goal? Or that was your plan when you went in? Were you thinking, I'm riding this out to retirement?
Dude, I was going to do 30. When I joined the LAPD, as soon as I hated probation. Because I'd love to be able to say.
Says nobody else.
Oh, man. Right? Like, I hated probation, man. But I hated probation because, you know, I had training officers that were not cool, man. I had training officers that were just like, man, whatever. You know, I had a hard time on probation, but I got through it. You just muscle through. And then when I was done with probation, you know, I had a kick assignment. They sent me to like traffic or something. And it was pretty chill. But I was already hooked because I did probation in South Central, man. I did probation at 77th. And it was rocking, man. It was rocking back then, like 99s and 2000s. It was really, really busy. And I was already hooked on the adrenaline. I was already hooked on the shootings and the foot pursuits and the vehicle pursuits and the crashes and the fires and the cops getting shot at and crime scenes. I was already in it, man. Accelerated because it was popping back then at 77th, the Southeast and Newton. It was cracking good.
So I want to kind of jump around a little bit. When we first started talking, you mentioned doing the bike ride a lot for yourself because you felt yourself spiraling in a bad hole.
Yeah.
How were you experiencing any of that while you were in the Marine Corps? Or did it start coming to where you were noticing it once you became a cop?
Just once I became a cop.
And how soon into the career did you start noticing it?
Almost immediately. I remember still being on probation, and I was in an area of LA, and it was my first shooting that I responded to, and it was two guys in a Chevy, I think it was like one of those Astro vans or GMC Safaris, something like that. And it was a shooting. I mean, I remember the night was kind of foggy, or like that mist, that marine layer kind of, and just two dead bodies in a minivan. The side doors were open and dudes are just hanging out. I'm like, oh man, that's real. Like, this is real. Like, this is legitimately happening. And I'm a couple weeks into probation. There's people getting murdered out here in the United States, in Los Angeles, on public streets that people travel every day, a few miles away from USC. This is really happening. People are getting gunned down. Because I'm going to be honest with you, I didn't know that it was going to be that real. And then it hit me like, boom, oh cow. Like, wow, man.
Did you know anybody? I know you mentioned you had family back east who are cops. But when you were getting close to becoming a cop yourself, did you have anybody that you could lean on who was already on the job?
No,
especially out here in California.
Nah, nobody. I mean, my cousin was a cop out there in New York, man. He went to jail.
So you really, even though you did spend 8 years in Marine Corps, you came into law enforcement blind.
Yeah, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, right? Through rose-colored glasses, man. I thought I was going to be like on TV and in the movies, man. Like, I knew it was going to be kind of crazy, but not like this. Not like this. And anybody who tells you that they knew it was going to be that crazy, they're lying. They're lying.
So how did you start dealing with it?
I drank a lot, man. I drank a lot. I started drinking about 2 years into the job, like heavily drinking. And I hid it from a lot of people, man. Not everybody knew that I was drinking the way I was drinking. And I would get to work early. I would work out like crazy, running, lifting weights or whatever. I would hit it super hard on my shift. I wanted to be the guy chasing guns all the time. And then at the end of the shift, man, the minute the vest came off, like, the Velcro, like, I'm like, damn, I want a beer so bad. I go right to the liquor store, 76 and Broadway, just get a beer. And yeah, that was it, man.
Was there ever a point in that 21 years where you were, I can't do this anymore?
That's a great question, man. And there's so many different ways to answer the question. It had become so much a part of me that I would never ask myself. I never told myself I can't do this anymore. Because to think that I couldn't do this anymore would mean that life would just be over. Right? Like, what the hell else am I going to do? This is so intertwined into my identity, right? That I never asked myself, can you continue to do this? It was like, no, man, this is it. Like, I'm in this for 30 years, and whatever I got to do to medicate, whatever I got to do to get through it, I'm going to do it. You know what I mean? You want me to come in early? I'm coming in early. You want me to stay late? I'm coming in late. You want me to sleep in my car in the parking lot right after my shift for 2 hours so I can make court, sit in court till 4 p.m., and then come back and work again until maybe 2 a.m. to do it again the next day? I'm good. I'm so good with that. As long as I'm getting overtime and as long as I can drink a little bit, man, I'm solid. I'm good.
What was your family life like?
Terrible.
Now, I know you mentioned a previous wife. Your current wife now, how long have you been married?
Can we edit this?
Yeah.
Because I'm going to get it wrong.
Then we're not editing it. And I'm going to make sure I remind her.
Man, I know it was October.
Give me a ballpark.
About 5 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were you at your worst at that point, or were you starting to come out of it at that point?
No, it was bad, bro. It was bad. Like a year before and a few months after meeting my wife, bro, it was bad. It was really bad.
What was her response to what she was seeing?
I would think that I would say she was confused, right? But the depression and the anxiety and the thoughts of suicide and things like that, man, I hit it really well. Because you become a master at it, right? You're able to function. Well, we think we can function.
Yeah.
You're able to get the job done. My work was declining, man. It was I was still hitting it hard in the street. Like, honestly, with a guy that has 17 years on the job, I was still chasing guns out there with regularity. Everybody knew it. And they're like, what are you doing, man? You're an idiot. And I'm like, this is all I know how to do. And they're like, you're going to get killed out here. Like, you're legit. I have been in 2 shootings already. They're like, you're going to get killed out here. And I'm like, who cares? That's how messed up my brain was. You know what I mean? But to answer your question, I don't know. I don't know what she was thinking, man. I don't even talk to her about it. You know, that's how messed up it was.
At the time, or do you still keep a lot of secrets now?
No, we talk about it openly now. The mental health thing is really important, right? The mental health discussions and, even for her, she's confused. I mean, there are times where she's like, man, you got to get out of your own head. Not so much now, but before. Like, this depression is crazy. Like, because I would wake up and be like, dude, I don't want to live anymore. And I know that I knew that my body couldn't handle the overtime and the work and the jumping out of the car, the getting back in the car. Like I was starting to get the aches and the pains, and I'm like, I'm in denial because I see these young cops and they're doing it, and I'm like, nah, you're not going to outwork me. There's no way. But I physically couldn't do it, and mentally I was just so tired. And I think that's what really, I mean, the shootings and the murders and the rapes, the robberies, the kidnaps, the crime scenes and all that stuff. Yeah, dude, that takes a toll. It takes a toll on you. But nothing hurts more than having to reconcile with the fact that you're done, man. You're going to go out to pasture. And that's what hurt the most, because I just couldn't keep up. I wanted to, but physically I couldn't do it. I couldn't hit the 15, 16, 17, 10-hour shifts anymore. And as I said earlier, my identity was so tied up in that and being a great cop, right? Officer of the Year, Gang Officer of the Year. I'm like, it's slipping away, man. Everything that I know that I'm good at is slipping away. And there's nothing I can do to get it back. And that for me, because you hear about it, man, guys that get out the Marine Corps and guys that get out, retire from the job, these guys kill themselves.
Well, I'm going to ask an obvious question. Was your social circle nothing but other cops?
Dude, I hung out with maybe one or two cops. I didn't hang out with anybody. And that's bad. Like, I didn't hang out with anybody. When I was off duty, I was either riding my bike or I was running or I was going for walks. Alone, man. Like, even my daughter was like, what in the world is wrong with this guy? But I didn't want to be around noise. I didn't want to be around sirens and helicopters and honking horns and loud bangs. And I don't want any of that nonsense, man. Where I lived on the foothill in the bottom of a canyon, in bottom of a mountain, like near a canyon. And I just wanted to be around trees and water, man. Just anything outside of that, get the hell away from me. And I would go down there and I would drink, because when I didn't drink, I was seeing that shit again. I was seeing that stuff again, like the crime scenes and very vivid pictures of like guys dead, covered in blood, and then there's ants crawling all over them. That's something I'll never forget, like the ants crawling all over bodies and stuff like that. And, people, little girls dead on the street and people taking their shoes, man. Like, having a 14, 15-year-old girl dead on the sidewalk, and as I'm getting there, people are taking her jewelry off of her. Like, what? Like, it was just crazy. And so it's just a little bit of everything, man. But the biggest piece, Paul, was it's over, man. You can't do this anymore physically. You can't hang with the young guys. And that hurt pretty bad.
So as much as you knew that, using a car analogy, you were running at Redline your entire career. And you take a step back, anybody telling you, if I run my car at Redline, it's gonna die.
Yeah.
You're doing that to yourself. Yeah. But at the same token, you are fighting, this is my identity, so I can't give it up.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And a lot of men do that. Yeah. And I would imagine that some women do that too. But at the time, you just don't know it. And there are cops that are going to hear this and they go, man, that's bullshit. Nah, dude, I'm telling you, I know guys that were running at Redline for years. And you look at them, these guys look like they're 80 years old. They're in their 40s, 50s. Or guys that are boozing all the time, right? I'm good. I'm fine. Nah, dude, you're not. And at the time, I thought this is what life is, but it's not, man. It's a trip.
Did you ever have somebody in your ear telling you, hey, you need to go talk to somebody?
No. Swear to God, dude, no. Because that's the culture, man. It's like, you just don't be a baby. It's
kind of a loaded question. And I think that we, in the first responder community, and even in the military side, we need to get better about it. And I think it's changing. But for somebody who's been in the game for 20 plus years, you know what it's like to come up through that generational thing of, hey, just put your head down and go and do your job.
Yeah, you're right, dude. Awareness is changing. I would ask, and I know that this is correlated to the men and women that were in combat, right? Probably, and I'm not an expert, so I'm not going to claim to be, and I'm probably wrong here, but of course there's a correlation with the number of suicides as it relates to those men and women that were involved in active combat, right? Or had exposure to chronic trauma in the form of bodies, shootings, or anything outside of what human beings should be exposed to for any length of time. There will be adverse effects, right? The human mind is a beautiful thing, but it's a very vulnerable organ, right? And layered is what makes it more difficult, to your point, is it's the culture, man. The culture doesn't allow for anything other than anger or testosterone, right? Like, suck it up, man. What's wrong with you? This dude's a baby. Or like, so it's getting better, the awareness piece. There's still a human piece to it. Mm-hmm. And there's still the very cultural man piece of it that doesn't allow for very, very open talks that allow you to be very vulnerable in those moments where you really need somebody, you know?
Wouldn't you say, though, that LAPD is probably one of the few agencies that's really on the forefront of that in-house available counseling and really recognizing the need, hey, just go talk to somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. Hands down. And I wasn't a cop in San Diego, Pomona, deputy sheriff. I can't speak to that. But what I can tell you is that LAPD, at any given moment, you make a phone call, somebody's going to answer that call. Somebody's going to answer, right? It got a little bit more difficult during the COVID time, right? You weren't doing the in-person stuff. But at any given moment, somebody's going to answer the phone. But that's the only safe place, man, is when you're in that office. When you get back to your division, back in the police car, you just can't talk about that stuff, you know, because cops are, well, callous, mm-hmm. right? Hey, man, you're gonna sit here and freaking whine and cry, but there's a lady whose daughter's missing and she hasn't seen her in 4 days, and you and I both know that somebody put her through a metal recycling bin, right? And at some point we're gonna have to tell her. So I don't want to hear your sob story, man, you know. Or hey, this guy is raping his 11-year-old daughter, and you want to sit here next to me and complain about the fact that you're sad? You got nothing to be sad about, man. You got people living in freaking tents, you know?
But what I say to that is what we need to be better is that's exactly what we need to be talking about, because the problem is the general public doesn't realize what you and I had to see through our entire career.
Right.
But even worse is, so you go to that shooting at walk and don't walk.
Yeah.
But you're going to keep going through that same intersection for the rest of your career. And you're going to remember that fight you were in, that kid that died in that intersection. That intersection is a constant reminder.
Yeah.
And to just think that you can shut it off and go, oh, I don't need to talk about it.
Yeah. You know, what was a great point, but what really helped me was, you know, my level of self-awareness has changed, right? My level of consciousness has changed. Understanding what mental health issues are, understanding that this is something that you can intervene with. I can intervene with myself. Here's the thing, though, man. What's the difference between a police officer in a police car dealing with it for 12 hours a day? And you and I both know that it extends beyond your shift, right? But the kid living in Watts or South Central or in the South Bronx who's seeing that shit all day, every day, coming back home, gunshots, you know, behind his house or his apartment, dope dealers across the street, gang members beating you up on your way to school. Like, and then how does that kid get help? There's not a lot of resources out there, brother. There's not, you know that.
I agree.
For these kids. And so back to what we were talking about, having the capacity or just a heart to be able to talk to Paul about what he's feeling. I don't think we'll ever get there, because the cop mentality is, dude, just suck it up, bro. You got people out here dealing with some real issues, right?
I do think we can get there, though, if people like yourself tell your story of, I started experiencing it while I was on probation, And what I did was I tried to hide it under alcohol. And I tried to hide it by not telling my family, to where it destroyed my family life. Yeah. If we talk about it enough, hopefully somebody listening today who's maybe dealing with it.
Yeah.
We're not telling you you don't need to make a 180-degree turn on a dime, but just think about going to talk to somebody. Start getting it out. And I think, it's like running, for example.
Yeah.
People come up to you and go, man, how do I run 6 miles? Go run a half mile.
Yeah.
And then when you can run a half mile, run a mile.
Yeah.
You don't need to do it all in one step.
Yeah.
Take those steps, but start making progress.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think we can.
Yeah.
But it's going to take a lot of effort. It's going to take a lot of effort, I honestly believe, from administration down to push that way of thinking from day one.
Yeah. Police executives are going to do what they have to do to check that box, right? They're going to build out infrastructure, supportive infrastructure, peer support, peer counseling, access to mental health professionals, doctors, clinicians, what have you. They know that they have to do that, right? That has now become a check the box thing for most agencies. But again, to your point, how do you get the people in uniform to be okay with going, right? That's the question. Because there's a lot of bravado tied to the not wanting to go get help, right?
And I'll throw this caveat in it. There are a lot of old timers who will sit here and bemoan millennials. But I'll tell you what, millennials are in touch with how they feel.
Yeah.
And they are going to be running our police departments in 20 years.
Yeah, well, yeah. Absolutely.
And so hopefully what they bring from the bottom up is that culture of it's okay to be in touch with how you feel.
Can I ask you a question if you don't mind?
Sure. I like the idea of it being more, a conversation back and forth.
So the composition, right? If you look at let's just say you look at a cop, man or woman, right? And you look at a cop not as a human being, but as, let's just say, like a layer of bricks. What comprises, what embodies a cop, right? What type of mentality do you have to have? What type of grit do you have to be the cop that's on the street all the time, working in the projects, man, working in bad neighborhoods, right? It takes a special person, man. You can't teach that stuff, to be quite honest with you. You can't teach bravery. You can't teach courage. But what comes with that, Paul, right? What comes with the person who's willing to stand in the line of fire is I believe that there's also this lack of reconciling with being vulnerable, right? So much of who you want to be and who you are is tied to the knight in shining armor, right? Riding in on a horse, or the person who is draped in an American flag, or the person who is walking a kid to school. Like that's who I want to be. And because I am that, there's a wall there that doesn't let me be vulnerable, right? And I don't know if that makes sense. What makes me a good street cop is also stopping me from getting the help that I need to get.
I would support everything you said. It is completely 100% true. There is a different type of person that is called to be a first responder. There's no way around it. You need that person who can turn off when the shit is hitting the fan and get the job done.
Yeah.
What I would say to that, though, is what is more important to our society? Do we want these non-feeling, non-compassionate robots working the street, and then we, and I say the collective we don't care about them when they go home. We don't care what they live in when they're home, at the bottom of a bottle, away from their families because all they want to do is be alone.
Yeah.
Insulating themselves with only those other people who reinforce that. Or could we make better steps towards you need to be strong. You need to be able to turn it on when it's hitting the fan, but you also need to be able to turn it off.
Yeah.
And make us feel it's okay to say, man, I saw that little kid was dead. That hurts.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with admitting that it hurts.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with admitting that it affects you.
Yeah.
Because the one thing that I would say, as much as I want a police officer to be strong and courageous and willing to step up, I want them to never lose compassion.
I'm with you, man. 100%. Beautifully stated. And I would imagine that most people feel the way you do. It's inevitably, though, you're going to go through a phase where you lose it all because you just become a machine, right? And only as you raise your level of awareness in terms of, being able to understand what you're feeling, can you transition back to someone who's compassionate again, right? Guarded at sometimes, right? But compassionate again. That's maturity. That comes in time. Unfortunately, though, for some people, before they're able to evolve and maybe break through the threshold of getting that compassion again, they're so locked into the depression and the anxiety and the alcohol and the self-medication that they end up taking their lives, right? I guess the broader question and the better question is, how do we know at what stage we should engage in intervention, right? Like, how does Paul know that guy, that girl right there, I got to do something, right? Because we mask it, right? You for the most part, you wouldn't know. Like, unless I told you, Paul, you wouldn't know.
Agreed, 100%. It goes back to what you were talking about, and we've all been there. The day you start in that black and white with your training officer, we both had training officers who were old salts.
Yeah.
Okay. And they basically, I'll be straight up honest, they probably, for the most part, taught you that everybody out there is a piece of shit.
Yeah, dude. Absolutely. Okay? Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Now, do I believe that people change? Of course I do. If you look at the overall health and wellness from a physical fitness standpoint, today, 2022, you're 2 years removed from the job?
Yeah.
I would be willing to bet there's much more, a bigger percentage of a police force that is physically fit and takes care of themselves compared to 20 years ago when you started. Mm-hmm. How many people do you know that still smoke cigarettes on a regular basis?
I don't know any.
Okay.
And my training officer used to smoke in the car.
So what I'm saying is, culturally, we've changed over the last 20 years. You don't see people smoking anymore as the way it used to be, like when we were kids growing up.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen overnight, but it happens. And if we just, I'll use the analogy of getting a locomotive going.
Yeah.
Of course, we've all seen that movie where when it's starting up, man, those wheels slip a couple times.
Yeah.
But once it gets going, it has momentum.
Yeah. We
just have to keep it going and build that momentum.
Yeah.
The day you're starting out in a patrol car, what if it was the flip side and your training officer's like, how do you feel after dealing with that?
Yeah, that'd be great. I tried to make it a point to do that when I was a training officer. My P1s, my trainees, they didn't know I was still boozing, right, and being stupid. But I would always tell them, hey, man, it's cool, man. If you're feeling a certain kind of way, it's okay. Yeah, no big deal.
Just something small like that, because what's the ripple effect that you had in that environment? Because you told that to one trainee, but then they carry that forward. And how many other people are they touching, as opposed to if you hadn't done that?
Yeah. What's interesting, man, is that I sometimes see cops that I worked with before, because I still live a stone's throw away from Watts in California, man, here in LA County, So I ran into some of the guys that I used to work with, and they'll tell me, man, it was a good time working with you, man. You were a bit nuts, but it was a good time. And it was good to be in a car with you. But again, they didn't know what the hell I was dealing with. I think you're right. I think if more training officers were like, it's cool, man. Like, no big deal. You need to take a break. You need to maybe hang out at the station for an hour. No big deal. Because the days, I think, of of the police work that you and I are used to, those days are over. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad. I'm glad that, the evolution of LAPD and other agencies is going in the right direction, man. And I think some cops say, oh, you can't do anything. The DA's office isn't filing this, or, Gascon is doing this. Or, man, whatever. Just come in, do your job, and punch out. That's it, because that's all you can do right now.
Always remember that there's going to be a minority that's the most vocal, but it's the majority that's silent, and those are the ones we're working for.
Yeah.
And if I'm going to put myself in that category. If the good ones walk away just because they're tired of listening to the noise from the minority, you're giving up on the people who really need you, which is that silent majority.
Yeah.
Now, if your heart is no longer in the job, if this is truly what you don't want to do, then please go find something. And I'm not saying this sarcastically. You need to think about yourself first. You need to think about your long-term health, the health of your family. And if this job is destroying you from the inside out, legitimately walk away from it.
Yeah.
But if you're just looking to walk away just because of the noise that's going on right now, you're giving up on the people who really need you.
Yeah. And you know what? That's what I did. It was a little bit of both. It was a noise, and it was like, dude, I would come to work and I would sit on the bench in the locker room. I remember one time I sat there for 2.5 hours. I'm like, the last thing in the world I want to do is put this uniform on. I'm so done, man. Like I'm done. It's over. Like I would go get lunch and I'd just sit there, just so pissed at the world that I couldn't do police work the way I wanted to because my body was broken. My body was done. I couldn't do it anymore, man. It hurt to put my belt on, man. I was a mess. And I did it to myself, But mentally, I was in worse shape. I couldn't do it anymore, man. I just could not.
Now, you said previously that you had a change in how you looked at your mental health. What was there a single event or an incident that caused that change, or what allowed you to kind of pull yourself out of it?
Right before I retired, there was an officer that had killed himself, and that's when I really started thinking, like, man, this is legit. This could happen. And I had been thinking about suicide for a long time, and I knew that being in a uniform is not where I should be if I was thinking about suicide with greater frequency, and if I was medicating with greater frequency. In a uniform is not where I deserved to be, right? Because the uniform is, and the badge, it's like, man, don't tarnish it. You can't do that. The guys that trained me would be pissed, right? And I don't want to say their names, but there were guys that did and still do amazing police work, and they'd be pissed. And that was it for me. Like, I knew that the road that I was going down with depression, I couldn't be in a uniform anymore because I didn't deserve to be in a uniform anymore.
Other than retiring, have you done anything for yourself in your mental health? Have you actually sought out help? Are you talking to anybody?
Yeah. I do, man.
Did that come after your retirement or while you were still on the job?
It was, I was still on the job, but it's like, going to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting at a bar. Right. You're getting help from LAPD's behavioral science, but you're still in it, man. And I'm like, I'm not going to get better. I'm going to end up killing myself. Like it got there. I'm like, I'm out. I'm not doing this anymore, man. This is crazy. And it's like, I never told that to, maybe one or two my good buddies on the job, but people that are going to hear this, if they know me, they're going to be like, oh, what the hell? Like, dude, are you kidding me? And, but that's where I was at. It is what it is. It continues to be what it is. I'll get through it. I read a lot more. I listen to people like Jocko Willink a lot. People like, David Goggins a lot. And I get it, man. These are the anomalies, right? Some people say these guys are over the top. I listen to Jordan Peterson a lot. Clinical psychologist. That dude is an absolute machine when it comes to unpacking the human mind and how the human mind works. I still have my bouts of depression, right? I'm in the executive world now. I love what I do. I have an amazing team. But when there's pressure on the job, I see myself going back to that very dark place. And I'm like, get your running shoes on and go hit the bricks, right? Get that workout in. You need that workout. People call me who are having a bad time, Paul, and I hate to admit this, but I don't answer, man. If you're depressed, dude, I'm not talking to you right now. I'm sorry, but I gotta do something for me right now because I'm in a very bad place.
I don't think that you should feel wrong for that. And I love using analogies. If you were on an airplane right now and the thing lost cabin pressure, what's the first thing they tell you about the air masks?
Put your mask on first.
Take care of yourself first, because you're not good to anybody else if you're not. So I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
You're at that point right now where I'm still working on fixing myself. Yeah. And I'm sorry, if I take on your baggage, it's just going to cause me to go backwards.
Yeah, yeah. And some people hearing this may be like, oh man, that guy's going through that stuff right now. Oh, he's probably weird or whatever. Dude, listen. It's a constant battle, right? But I'm on the winning side right now, and I genuinely believe it's because I'm not seeing the killings and the shootings and the pressure and this and that all the time. There's different pressure outside in this executive world, right? Different pressure, but it's manageable, right? I know nobody's trying to kill me, or you make these things up in your mind, right? Like nobody's trying to kill you, man. Like you're on the 405 driving home, like relax. But,
well, you're not driving. You're you're going forward 2 inches and then sitting for 20 minutes.
Yeah. Because you go 4 or 5 miles an hour. But you know what I mean, right? Like it's always in the back of your head, and I'm starting to disengage a little bit more. Like, oh man, this is cool. It's good. It feels good, man. It feels really good.
Let's change it to, I don't want to say that we haven't been talking positively. So when you were getting ready to punch out, what was give me your process? Were you starting to look at work, or did you just kind of figure, let me get out and then see what's out there?
I had worked off duty quite a bit. I had made some pretty good relationships, and I knew that I had something on the way out. I knew that a few months before I pulled the trigger. I had not limited myself to just like the cop stuff. Right? I was doing different things, and so it set me up for what's on the outside. The darkest days of my life, though, Paul, right, were in that transition. Even though I had it set up, even though I had planned, like, hey, this is what I'm gonna do when I get out, that it was tough, dude. Because what I talked about earlier was leaving your identity behind, right? Just boxed it all up. There it is. It was tough, man. It was tough, but yeah, I did some planning, and it was a smooth transition in terms of, having a job when I got out.
Now you've got a unique experience. You've gone from military to law enforcement, so you've already seen the culture change there.
Yeah.
Now you've gone from law enforcement to the private sector.
Right.
What was that transition like? And for somebody looking to make their transition, what advice can you give them?
It was brutal. And I talk to guys that are in that transition now, and they're having a hard time, a really hard time. And even some of my former colleagues that are in transition are having a hard time because they're so tied to that as that's who I am. The badge is me, right? The badge is me. The carrying a gun off duty, that's me, right? The blue line t-shirts, that's me. The Oakleys, that's me. Everything about that life is so connected to your identity that when you go, I'm done, well, who are you now? Who are you now? And not that anyone needs advice, but I would recommend that you start thinking about that a couple years before you retire. Start disconnecting, right? Start taking those vacations and that time off. If you're working at 312 or 410, work at 312 and a 410. Don't work the off-duty shift at, MTA. Don't sit there for, 2, 3, 4 hours overtime at the end of your shift. Start weaning off, a couple years before you transition out, man, because it's really helpful if you do that. Start reinventing yourself. So when you get out, you're like, dude, I interviewed a guy who did 31 years on the job, and he came to me because I'm hiring some people right now. And I said, "What? Why do you want to do this? Well, why do you want to work after 31 years?" I just don't know who I am. I just don't know who I am. I got to do something, man. And I could see in his eyes, man. And I knew that dude. And I could see in his eyes, he's just like, I don't even know who I am anymore, man. I'm like, you're young. Like, you got your whole life ahead of you. But I could tell that was a guy that his whole life was being a cop, you know. And he didn't prepare for when he was done, you know. And he's hurting right now.
I would almost add to, and I do agree that you need to start planning for that transition. And one of the things is to reinvent your identity. I would almost suggest you should be doing that from day one.
Yeah.
I always tell people this. I go, you know, you made the comment about the blue line shirt, carrying the gun off duty. Think about your friends who's a plumber. Think about your friends who's an auto mechanic, other than their dirty nails.
Yeah.
Think about your friend who's a doctor.
Yeah.
When they're not working, that doctor's not walking around with a stethoscope around his neck.
Yeah.
You know, when that plumber's not working, he's not walking around with a monkey wrench looking like, hey, can I fix a pipe?
Yeah.
You know, I get it's a subtle balance.
Yeah.
And we've had some incidences recently where, yes, people carrying off duty have helped save an incident. Mm-hmm. But at the same token, if, like you said before, if that's your identity, you're not benefiting yourself long term.
Yeah. Yeah. You're not helping anybody else. You know, because your family's looking at you like, bro, who's that guy on the couch that hasn't moved for hours? Like, because you go from cop, retired, now you're on your couch. Because every cop talks, man, I can't wait to get the hell out of here. I'm not doing anything, man. I'm just going to chill. You chill for a couple of weeks and you're like...
That doesn't work. That's why they die within 2 to 3 years after retirement.
In their sleep. You know what I mean? Just, no, man, I don't want to die, Paul. I love life, dude. I want to live forever, bro.
Your first goal, my theory is your first goal should be to get as many years in retirement as you gave them in working.
Yeah, it's going to happen.
If you were on the job for 30 years, then your minimum goal is to get 30 years back in retirement.
Good years, though.
Yes.
Good years, man. I want to do some fishing, right? I do my running. You know, I do my workouts. Weekends, I hit the beach. As soon as I get out of here, man, I'm going to go to the beach, go for a nice long run. And just chill, you know, with the family, go to dinner. I just want to chill, man, you know, because I know when Monday comes, I got to hit it hard again. But I'm learning how to enjoy life right now.
Now, the job that you have right now, can you mention the company you work for?
I can't.
Okay.
I can't.
Can you talk about what your duties are that you do?
Yeah, so I am a senior director of asset protection, right? So I oversee an investigative team that is responsible for mitigating external theft, internal theft, embezzlement, billing fraud, and you name it in terms of how you protect the company. But my job is very specific to supply chain and distribution, right? So anything coming into our business and anything that we process in our facility and push out, me and my team and I are responsible for making sure that product moves safely throughout the supply chain, right? So it's a lot of work, man. I got a solid team, good guys, and we have a lot of fun. Stressful as hell, right? But it's cool. We have a good time.
You mentioned that you already kind of had this lined up coming into it.
Yeah.
But now that you're in it, for somebody who is coming towards their retirement or their transition and looking at a similar type job, what qualifications do they need to bring to the table to get a position like what you're doing?
The hardest part about, and I would say, read How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie as often as you can. You get done reading it, read it again, and then read it again, and then read it again. Because the hardest thing for people to do when they transition out of that public sector and into the private sector is how to just engage with people, right? Listen, I may not be the most qualified. You may not be the most qualified guy for the job, but you're the right guy. You know what I mean? It's how you interface with people, how you communicate, how you present yourself, right? How you are as a leader, a compassionate, kind, loving person as a leader. The rest of the stuff you can learn. Now you got to get your feet wet a little bit before you pull chocks and get out of there. You got to start building your network, right? That's a huge deal. Networking and building relationships and fostering and nurturing those relationships. You're going to have to do things for free, right? I would say that if you're transitioning out of the police department and you have a certain skill set, while you're in the police department, be an auditor, be an investigator, be the community outreach and the community engagement person. I was the equivalent of a grunt in the Marine Corps when I was on the job. All I did was chase people with guns. That's all I did in South Central Los Angeles and in South Los Angeles. That's all I did. Guns, chase people, climb fences, shootings. That's all I wanted to do. But how does that help me when I get out? It doesn't. You know what I mean? It doesn't help you.
It's fun at the time.
Yeah. Be an investigator. Develop your investigative skill set. Be an auditor. Go work inside. Go work internal affairs, man. Learn how to do things that
now you're
translate.
Really going to make everybody mad. Go work internal
whatever,
affairs.
Dan. Well, it's like one of those things like whatever. Like, people call me sometimes. They go, hey, man, what should I do with my career? Do whatever the hell you want to do. Just make sure, like my dad told me when I joined the Marine Corps, when you get out the Marine Corps, you're going to have a very specific skill set. I was a helicopter mechanic. I worked on flight control systems. I wasn't a grunt, man. I wasn't out there, running and gunning. But I had something for when I get out. I had a very special set of skills. While you're on the police department, develop a very special set of skills. Something that is the anomaly, right? You don't have to push a black and white your whole career. Be an investigator. Be a detective, be an auditor, work community engagement, work with the homeless, work with little kids. Because when you get out, people are going to say, what else can you do besides push a black and white? Well, not much. Well, what else can you do besides, chase a guy, set up a perimeter, right? Set up containment, communicate, coordinate, control, contain, get resources, lock the place down, do a canine search, find the gun, collect evidence, find the bad guy, book him. You don't do that
None
anywhere
of that
else,
transitions
man.
to the civilian world.
Nobody cares. Nobody cares. What they care about is how can you protect my company? How can you make my company money, right? And what do you want for that? Well, this is what I'm going to do for you, and this is what I want. You got it. No problem. And can you talk to people? Can you be kind, compassionate, right? Can you be articulate? Can you convey a message, right? That's what they want, man. And the reality of it is this. If you're an asshole in the civilian world, you're out. You're done. As a cop, you can run your mouth at the station, talk this, talk. I'm not writing that ticket. I'm not doing this. I'm not staying here. I'm not working overtime, or, you know what, Sarge, I'm not doing X, Y, and Z. And they'll deal with it. They'll just move your ass to the front desk, right? And you can sit at the front desk and write paper all day. On the civilian side, hey, I need you to do X, Y, and Z. I'm not doing it. Get your shit. Get out of here. Bye. Because I got 50 people waiting in line to take your job. You know what I mean? Hey, I need you to wear a collared shirt tomorrow. I need you to wear a tie. I'm not doing that. Bye. Bye. But I got a family. Don't care. Right? But I got mouse. Don't care. But I got a car note. Oh, well.
You should have wore a shirt and tie.
You should have wore a shirt and tie. Right? You should have shined your shoes. Right? You should have said, yes, sir. No problem. I got it. Right? You should have said, yes, ma'am. No problem. I'll have it to you tomorrow. No big deal. You got to know, man, that it's a whole different ball of wax, whole different set of rules, man. And that's that. I think that's the hardest part that people have. It's tough because nobody's going to go to bat for you. You're on your own. You know what I mean? So
the company you work for is quite large. Are they based in Southern California?
Yeah.
So you were able to find a company that allowed you to stay in Southern California. But with the level that you're at, do you have to travel frequently?
I used to. Before I got this job, I was already working on my own thing, right? And I was traveling quite a bit. And because I had done that and because I had built relationships, I got this job. Struggled hard. Still struggle because
just adapting to the corporate world.
No, I did that. I did that with ease, right? Because I had developed a very special skill set in communications, right? So that was okay. It's just that you getting cross-functional buy-in is very difficult, right? It's because everybody wants to die on their own hill. And with my job, I have to bring people together, and I have to get people to look at things from a different perspective, and then come to terms with the fact that, hey, maybe this process is wrong, or maybe we're missing something here, and getting people to understand that I can't get there without Paul. I can't get there without Mike or John or Jane or Jill, right? And that's the Marine Corps, and that's LAPD, right? It's got to serve a warrant, got to hit this house tomorrow, 4:00, ready, set, go. Hey, but get it done. No, but get it done. And so on LAPD, hey, Paul, I need a favor, man. I'm going to write this warrant. I'm going to hit this house. I'm going to bring this case to you tomorrow. I need you to be in at 5:30. No problem. Got it. Bringing that into the corporate world, right where I'm at, that was tough because I was used to just making a phone call and things just happening.
And the person on the other end of the line said, I got it.
Now I have to say, hey, Paul, let me take you to lunch. You drink coffee? Yeah. I'll bring you some coffee tomorrow. Just give me 5 minutes. All right, no problem. Relationships, man. Networking, relationships. How to win friends and influence people. It's a challenge, but I like it a lot.
You still got the apparel company going?
No, man. When COVID hit, that came to a screeching halt, man. I tried my hand at Battle Cry, which is something that I still believe in. But hey, either you're a businessman or a businesswoman, or you're not. And if you're not, you gotta work really hard. Everybody wants to have their own business, right? But they don't see what happens behind the curtain. It's a lot of work, man. You can't part-time your own business. You can't do it, man. And I know guys that try to do it.
Not if you want to be successful at it.
Yeah. It's glamorous. You can't part-time your own business. You're gonna fail. And I knew that. And I knew. And I want to get to financial freedom right now. I'm just focused on getting where I need to be so that I can come back and then reinvest into my own business again. That's my plan. But no, it's not going right now.
And on top of that, you and your wife run a cafe restaurant, correct?
Yeah, that's her thing. She makes it very clear. This is my business.
You stay out.
Yeah, I stay out. No, I help out, but that's her business. I can't take credit for any success that she's built.
What type of food?
Off of that, it's custom handmade ice cream, handmade cookies, organic coffee. Partnered with a guy in Compton who runs a very successful coffee company, and we're all about the community, man. Hire from within the community. All about the movement, man, for young kids in the inner city. That's her thing, and she's killing it, man.
Is your wife Southern California, LA, born and raised?
Yeah. Right. Yeah, Southeast LA, man.
What's the company name so we can...
It's called Milk and Cookies LA. Milk and Cookies LA. It's in Southgate, California, man.
The whole social media thing, Instagram, the whole 9 yards?
Yeah, you name it, it's in there. Milk and Cookies LA. It cracks. It's pretty good. It'll hit you right here, man. Yeah.
I appreciate your openness to talk about what you dealt with.
I appreciate you, man.
Any last thing that advice you could give to somebody who's kind of maybe in the middle of that right now? Maybe they're going down their dark circle.
I don't know, Paul. It's a great question. I don't like to give advice, man. I would just recommend that if you're feeling something and it doesn't feel right, it's okay to ask a question. It really is okay to call somebody and go, hey, man, I got so wasted last night. Or in my case, like, hey, man, like I keep having these nightmares. What the hell's going on? Right? If you don't know, ask a question, man. I mean, you're in this line of work where you're trying to solve everybody else's problems. And through that, you forget that you got your own set of problems and half the shit you're creating for yourself, not advice. I would just recommend that you pick up the phone and call somebody, man. You get on Instagram, they have Cerebral, that's like a mental health app or something like that. And just whatever you got to do to learn and educate yourself on what this is, you got to do it. I'm no expert, man, and I'm not going to speak to it, but read, learn, disconnect, get away. Be be in nature, man. Be in nature. Have a friend, man. I hope that after this, Paul, you and I remain friends, dude. Like that we talk or whatever, and maybe, you know, go for a run or something, get a workout in. You know, I need good, healthy relationships. And lastly, and I hope this doesn't come off the wrong way, but guys, you need to be around good, solid guys, right? You need, you know, I know guys that love jiu-jitsu, man, and that's awesome because they get to roll around and get punched in the face and get twisted up in a knot. That's good stuff. You know, I was on the LAPD boxing team. I got cracked in the face a few times. I like that stuff. It's okay to be rough and rugged sometimes. You know what I mean? You need good, healthy relationships with your male counterparts, man. That's good stuff.
And not just males. I mean, you need to have quality, strong women in your life too.
Oh yeah, dude. Yeah. 100%.
And the thing is, and not to go on a different tangent or a different soapbox, but you need to be thinking about who you're exposing your kids to. And if you're exposing them to not strong men or not strong women, what are they going to grow up to be?
Yeah, 100%. And that starts with you too, man.
True.
You know, yeah, man, I'm lucky I got some good guys in my life that have really been there for me, man. Good people, and I hope you're one of them.
Myself included. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you coming here.
Appreciate you, brother. Thanks, man.
I appreciate you watching. But before you go, if you like the video, please hit that subscribe button. Also, any comments are appreciated. Thank you.